Hi and welcome to my video. If you're watching this, I assume that you're either curious about getting into coding or have already decided to start and now are looking at where to begin. So before I start, full disclosure, I am not a software developer and probably never will be. I haven't published any apps in any programming language. I thought it'd be cool to learn how to make apps and hopefully make some kind of app and perhaps generate a little bit of money from it. But even if I don't achieve this, hopefully I'll get enough satisfaction from learning something new, rather than binge watching a Netflix show or something, which I probably do too much already. I've been learning Swift for about a month now. My teachers at school used to say that if you can explain something that you've learned to help someone else, you can truly say that you've mastered that skill. I also know in myself that I'm very good at starting projects, not so good at finishing them. And so I hope in some way people will find these videos I start interesting, learn something from it, will like or subscribe, and that will give me a little extra nudge to keep the momentum of trying to learn something new so I can present it to other newcomers and we can help each other. I have watched various Swift videos on YouTube. Many of the presenters are really experienced and really know their stuff, although I sometimes find they assume knowledge or gloss over things. Or perhaps they use a shortcut to solve a problem they run into when presenting how to make a project. But then when I've tried for my own projects, I then spend hours trying to solve a problem to fix an error message that didn't pop up in their lesson. So hopefully I'll remember the issues I faced and I'll be able to explain how to overcome them. You do get a lot of satisfaction from completing a project, and I was probably guilty of starting new ones before taking the time to fully understand what was happening in the code. So I'm going back to basics, reviewing old work, and trying to understand something enough to be able to explain what's happening to other people, even if my terminology isn't always perfect. So with that in mind, even if this is the only video you watch of mine and you decide to follow other people from a more professional background, please follow this one piece of advice. Videos that are more than a year old are only going to be of limited help. Swift is always being updated. Without getting into the specific technical reasons, if you watch the older videos, you'll notice that the software looks different when comparing the screens to the video you're watching. Buttons and icons will be different. The commands you type will sometimes be different too. If you have some Swift or other programming knowledge, you may be able to get around these issues. But as a newcomer, you'll likely find the whole thing quite a frustrating experience, and you may well end up getting stuck halfway through a project with no way of resolving it yourself as the advice on the video is out of date. So if you do want to begin creating Apple apps, what do you need to create these apps? Well, ideally, you need some kind of Apple laptop or desktop of some description. There are some apps on the iPad to begin to learn how to use Xcode. However, you aren't able to write your own apps, so just having an iPad isn't enough. When starting out learning, you may be able to use some software to be able to write code on a Windows computer, or perhaps rent a virtual computer online. There are various videos on YouTube or articles online that discuss those things. However, you'll only be able to create prototypes and test those prototypes on simulators. You won't be able to test it on a real iPhone or iPad, and you won't be able to upload it onto the App Store. Although if you're new to coding, that final step may be a little way off. Google has created software called Flutter. Apparently, if you code in that language, you'll be able to convert to both Android and apps. I've looked at it briefly, but I was a bit put off because it seemed quite complicated to set up to get the two pieces of software to talk to each other. But if you don't have a MacBook, it might be something that you might want to look into. Again, there are plenty of videos on YouTube and articles online. It isn't essential that you have an iPhone or an iPad, but it is beneficial. The software does have a simulator, but if for example you create apps that responds to when you tilt or hold the device in a certain way, you won't be able to test it on the simulator. If you do have an Apple device, you're able to transfer some of your apps you write onto the device, so you can both test it and also show off your progress to your friends when you see them, which is kind of cool and helps motivate you. When you get started and write apps, you can transfer those apps onto your phone or iPad for free. If you get to the point where you're thinking of putting apps on the App Store, you need to create a developer account, which costs around $99 a year. If you only have Windows computers, or you only use phones and devices that use Android software, you may want to look at downloading Android Studio and learning how to code in Android instead. The startup software is also free to upload. Again, there are various courses on Android Studio and articles online on how to get started. If you have the equipment and you want to get started making iPhone or iPad apps, simply go to the App Store and type Xcode. Click on Install and follow the instructions and prompts given. You'll be asked to create an account. Just choose the option of the free developer account. There are beta versions available on the Apple website, but I'd advise not to use them at the moment. Beta versions are newer versions of software that are released to the public to test. Professional developers or journalists may want to use the beta versions to play around with the new features, so they are ahead of the game when the new version becomes released to the general public. Or maybe they just want to support Apple in finding bugs and issues before it gets released to the public. Because of this, beta versions are still in the testing phase, which means there may still be bugs in the software. So for someone new to this, it's better to use the public version that has been properly tested and made available on the App Store. I'll leave you to do that, as it's quite a simple task to do, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.